This is Popping the Bubble with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
Hi, my name is Nick Pashos, the founder and CEO of BioAesthetics.
And I'm Billy Heim, the COO of BioAesthetics, and we're on Popping the Bubble.
Awesome. Good work, you guys.
You guys are awesome. You're choreographed. You do amazing work. Thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Thank you for having
Our
us.
pleasure.
You guys have a very exciting company. I think it's going to impact a lot of people in this world positively that are suffering and have issues, especially with breast cancer. Maybe just tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
Sure. So BioAesthetics was founded to create regenerative solutions for mastectomy patients. And our inaugural product is a nipple and areola graft that would be engrafted onto the patient to allow for them to regrow their own nipple and areola complex during the reconstruction period after mastectomy.
That's amazing. I know my mother worked with a plastic surgeon all growing up, so I'm very familiar with the mastectomy process and its impact on women. And it is a really psychological impact in terms of losing your breast. It's just so closely tied to your identity as a female. Being able to have a breast that looks normal again is just so important and impactful for these women. So it's really awesome what you're doing.
Thank you.
What's changed in the world of science? I mean, there's so many things we still don't know. We ultimately don't know why ice skates work on ice. We have theories, but no definitive answer. Heck, there's 9 kinds of ice. All of these things that we're finding out, we barely know how weather works. What unlocked the door for this type of thing to replace a nipple? What made this possible?
I'm a biomedical engineer, and so is Billy. And I was originally working at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. And I read this paper about regrowing lungs outside the human body as alternative to transplants. And I was like, wow, how incredible is that to replace transplant, cut down the wait time for it and to regrow someone's own organ somewhere else, right? And implant it back into that body. And I said, all right, I'll go back to graduate school and get a PhD and work in the lab that was creating that, right? So I did. I moved down to New Orleans at Tulane, learned all about the techniques on how do you create these lungs outside the human body. And then I was watching a documentary one night, and they were talking about mastectomies and how these women during the reconstruction period may not have a real nipple anymore. They may have just a nipple-like structure or just a tattoo, or maybe they'll have a prosthetic of a nipple, right? And you take that on and off at nighttime made of rubber. And I said, I bet we could do what we're doing with the lungs and translate that over, right? So that science was there. It was just a matter of the application and reimagining that science on something else. And that's kind of how BioAesthetics was born.
So what is the process? How do you do it so that the body doesn't reject this new tissue?
Sure. So what we do is we take donor tissue or the patient's own nipple and areola complex if they have a prophylactic mastectomy, and we can remove all the cells and all the DNA from it, and we're left with a protein structure that's maintain the nipple protrusion of the nipple and areola complex, and then we would engraft that back onto the patient, and the patient's own cells grow into it and essentially regrow their own nipple and areola complex.
So there's no issue with rejection?
No issue in rejection because these are human proteins and we're not putting in any cells and we're not putting in any DNA. It's just the protein that your body would make naturally. So your body's very familiar with it.
So you're depleting the cells. How does that work?
So basically what we do is we introduce the donor tissue into a series of washes. And within about 11 days, we come out with a material that is purely just proteins and no cells left over and no DNA left over. And so processes like these and devices similar have been used in hernia repair and different areas of reconstruction in the body for over 30 years. So we know these are very, very safe for the people. And most often, breast cancer survivors who undergo a reconstruction, 56% of them who have a prosthetic breast reconstruction will have some sort of material like this inside of them already used to support their pre-existing skin. So it's using it for a different application and moving it forward to give a more sort of holistic approach to the breast reconstruction field.
So what would stop a surgeon from actually removing the nipple and areola to begin with and then reapplying it once the implant is in?
What would stop them from doing it?
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't want to utilize someone's own nipple and areola who has had cancer. Mm-hmm. So if you have ductal positive cancers, right, a duct goes up to the tip of your nipple. That's what your nipple is essentially made of, is a series of ducts. So if you have ductal positive cancer, then you'd want to remove that nipple and probably not reuse it. In which case you would get a donor nipple areola that we would then process it and send it to the plastic surgeon for them to utilize it, just like they do for other types of materials now. Or if it's a prophylactic mastectomy, we could utilize a patient's own tissue and give them back their own nipple and areola.
Sorry, what's a prophylactic mastectomy?
It's a mastectomy that's more preventative. So say someone's tested for the
like what Angelina Jolie had.
Exactly, right.
So the nipple has a lot of characteristics that are unique. If you strip everything out and it's just protein, does it still have erectile tissue? Do you regenerate nerves to have a sensation there? What happens? I mean, it's great to have it look, but is it functional?
Yeah, I mean, so what I love about this is the simplicity of the technique and using the actual unique biological structure of the nipple rather than trying to recreate it like 3D printing, which there are tons of companies trying to do. So you're harnessing the power of nature and evolution that's occurred over however long, and you're basically just washing it like you wash your clothes, which removes the cells and debris, and then you can implant that on. So the simplicity is what I find extremely awesome about this. Nick's the brainchild, and I'm helping on the business side, but I appreciate that fact. But then in terms of what happens, so we engraft this onto a patient. Their own cells will migrate into the scaffold, which the cells are used to that, and then the blood vessels will grow in behind that. There is opportunity for nerves to grow in. It's not something we can claim at this point that we will do, but it's something that we won't inhibit. And we have some decent lab data just in vitro where we seeded nerve cells and they grow nicely through the scaffold. But feeling is going to depend on what type of mastectomy there was, if there are nerves in the area. I mean, there's a whole host of issues that can go into that.
And if I'm not a doctor, I just know a little bit about science. If I'm not mistaken, nerve generation is about 1 millimeter a month. And so, it might take a while, right?
Absolutely. It'll take a long time. And as Billy was saying, that is something that we are looking to work more towards. We do have very nice data from the lab, in vitro data, sort of in a petri dish data, if you will, growing nerves inside of it very beautifully. And we have video and imagery of that. It's a matter of how does that translate over to a person, a living system, right? So if someone has a mastectomy, they remove quite a bit of tissue, especially if it's a total mastectomy, including the skin that's surrounding it, right? You even need to sometimes get a tissue expander after to expand out that breast skin for it to handle an implant after or autologous reconstruction. If it's something like that, the nerves aren't in that area anymore, and if it takes a very long time to grow back, if at all, so we're not saying we would engraft this and you would have feeling immediately, but our scaffold does encourage nerve growth. And so there's always that potential down the road, and we're hoping to kind of harness that later down the line. The immediate product is the structure, to have a living structure of the nipple areola complex. And as Billy was saying, it's a very unique structure that it's maintained during this processing. So your regular skin is flat. It's made to be flat, right? Your nipple actually has protein structures that are unidirectional throughout that give it that projection. And we can preserve that and harness that and reutilize that to give back a mastectomy patient's nipple and areola.
Yeah, and we just actually saw the sample down in the lab, which was really interesting. And it looks like a nipple, minus the color.
Minus the color.
Right. And that's, as we spoke, that's kind of our phase B of the product. We'd like to then, take this and then figure out how to bring the coloring back.
Do you guys have any idea how to do that?
Definitely. We're working on it.
It's proprietary.
We're working on a few. It's going. So, as of right now, the coloring will be of the patient's native skin color. Mm-hmm. From there, we're working on it.
Where are you guys right now in the process? So we've got some nipples that are in the fridge.
Yeah.
And
right.
What's next?
Sure. So the goal of the product is for, a plastic surgeon basically to take it right off of a shelf and engraft it onto a patient.
Wait, does there have to be, well, I guess because all the cells are gone, there doesn't need to be any kind of matching process for the donor to donor, or?
So it would be much like they would match it for breast implants. You want a certain size, you want a certain length, you'd be able to take that off a shelf, right? Or we can send them something that's a little bit more customized to match if they only have a single mastectomy and they want to match the nipple size, right? Where we are right now is basically we have the product down, and we're looking at how fast and how well blood vessels grow and skin grows back into it. And that's where we are right now. We're about 18 months away from engrafting onto our first person. So we're very excited for that. Yeah, we're just working through the processes as we go every day.
So, and so you're going to be doing some testing on things like or small creatures and mice and things like that?
Yeah, so we're going to be going for a biological living system to ensure that, in a living system you have a lot of different things going on at the same time, right? Blood vessels grow, so we want to utilize those to see how well they grow into the nipple areola complex to make sure it's safe for it to go into people.
Yeah. I mean, to that end, we do have some small animal data showing cells that grow into the scaffolds, show blood vessels growing in the scaffolds, show red blood cells in the blood vessels in the scaffolds, and then also reepithelialization, so the skin growing. Right. On top of the scaffold. Our next steps, we will be going to a larger animal model to prove this out further. What we need that for is to show plastic surgeons who would then adopt this and promote that to their patients, as well as for the patients to see that data and say, I want this.
Right.
And of course the reason why we're doing this all is just to make sure it's safe for these people.
Of course.
Right. So mastectomy patients and breast cancer survivors have been through a tremendous ordeal. So we want to make sure whatever we're supplying to plastic surgeons to put on to these survivors and individuals, that it's completely safe. And that's those steps that we're taking. And we have been for the past 3 years. So moving forward, we have another 18 months before we feel as though it's perfect for a breast cancer survivor or a mastectomy patient.
Is the government involved in an approval process for all of this?
Yeah, the FDA oversees basically anything that's being implanted into a body. Of course, we have to meet all the standards through the FDA and as well as donor tissue as well. So there are strict guidelines that we have to absolutely follow.
And this, follows very similar guidelines to that of whole organ transplants because it's considered more of a tissue transplant.
The donors, I guess, are cadavers from a variety of things. Is there an incentive for them to say specifically they want their, can they say, I want my nipples to be donated to someone that doesn't, have something like that? Is that?
Absolutely. Always making your wishes known, always being an organ donor is a fantastic gift that you can give someone else, right? This is just an additional gift, basically, is, giving back a different part of your body that means a lot to someone else. And so you can definitely specify it, and going out and becoming an organ donor is one of the best things you can do.
And that's something we're also working with tissue banks now and talking to them about getting tissues and beginning to get those ready for when we're ready for the actual clinic. And part of that is the patient consent and very much informing them and their families about, okay, you're donating your tissue, it will be used for this purpose, are you willing to participate? And so it's a great way to give back and help people down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the business challenges you guys have encountered along the way in this 3-year endeavor?
Well, I think on the business side, it's primarily understanding what we need for the FDA. And then also, I think we've been learning a lot about how tissue procurement and organ procurement and that whole side of the business works. So it's been very educational, and I think we're finding our way through. Otherwise, on the business side, I think, we're always looking for fundraising. Unfortunately, that's usually a slower process than you like it to be. I'd say that's kind of what we've been doing on the business side.
All right, I want to ask the question, what's a nipple going to cost?
So that's something that we're trying to work out right now through our business model, right? So if you go out and have a breast reconstruction, it's actually very expensive, right? Most likely, an insurance company will reimburse a breast reconstruction and a nipple reconstruction because they see a nipple reconstruction as an essential portion of a breast reconstruction. And in fact, if a woman can have a nipple reconstruction immediately after mastectomy, she's more likely to have that life-saving mastectomy otherwise, right? We're trying to get it to a cost that's basically the same out-of-pocket cost as if someone was to get a 3D tattoo, right? So after reimbursement, we don't want to exclude anyone from it, but that insurance reimbursement is obviously going to take some time, but we're working on it. So we're not sure right now.
How do you guys describe what you do at a dinner party?
There's
BioAesthetics, the nipple company.
Yeah, so
that's the quick. At least someone remembers,
right? And that's it. Basically, is we're creating regenerative solutions for mastectomy patients and breast cancer survivors, and this is our inaugural product, and we hope to continue down the line as we move forward. So I always try to start it out with exactly that, is just to give a 2 little sentence overview of kind of top level of what we're doing. The nipple and areola graft at the end of it kind of catches people off guard, always gets them smiling. They always think we're joking, and then we start talking about it. Everyone knows someone who's been affected by breast cancer. There are 2.8 million breast cancer survivors currently living in the United States. This is a huge community, absolutely massive community. Everyone knows someone, right? When you start thinking about what that person has gone through, and then you understand how much the nipple and areola is playing a role in that, or could play a role in that, people get it immediately. Surgeons get it immediately. Everyone does.
And the big thing today is breast cancer is a survivable disease, right? It's no longer a killer, which is amazing. But for a lot of the women going through the recovery process, what do I do now?
Exactly.
I've beat it. I've survived it. Now what do I do? We hope that our product will play a very important role in not defining that, but at least helping that recovery process.
And that's exactly what we've been trying to do too, is talk to breast cancer survivors, and we have been. We've been talking to key players, plastic surgeons, breast cancer survivors. I think we're up, close to probably 200 sort of informal and formal interviews where we've discussed this. And what do you want? What do you want to see? Is this something you would use? And we've received tremendous amount of very helpful feedback from breast cancer survivors. I mean, they're probably the strongest people I've ever met in my entire life, right? And they always have great feedback on it. And so we've tried to pursue it in that manner. And the same thing with the plastic surgeons. We want this product to be used, and we want it not to say, this is the product, right? You use it this way. We want it to be an open discussion. And so that's what we have been doing over the past several years and getting that feedback. And that's actually how we got to our current iteration of our product. So it's changed quite a bit through those conversations with the breast cancer community and surgeons.
How do you market this? I mean, it's awesome, especially for someone who's already had breast cancer and had a reconstruction. But for the person that it doesn't know yet, and it gets presented, and the plastic surgeon's like, I think this is going to work. And there's a lot of learning there and a lot of product familiarity you have to develop. What are you guys going to do?
So this goes back to talking to the community and talking to the plastic and reconstructive surgeons. There's a huge sort of ecosystem, if you will, of the educational process from when a breast cancer patient, either male or female, understands that they have breast cancer to the reconstruction, right? Massive. You talk to a tremendous amount of doctors. You have a support system, hopefully, and generally you do. And so it's being part of that. And how can we support these survivors along the way and these patients along the way? The back end is talking to those plastic surgeons to making sure, that they have this option available for these patients when those patients come in. This is going to be a regrown nipple and areola for these patients why wouldn't you carry it? So that's what we're talking to, and that's what we're trying to move forward with.
Do you also have to have a training for the doctors in terms of how to apply it? Is that something you guys provide to them?
I think that's going to be informed by some of our key opinion leaders or our early adopter plastic surgeons. I mean, I think we have a little bit of idea from early feedback, but obviously once you start using it, that might change a little bit. And what we expect to see is that as our early adopters pick it up, we'll then be collecting data on that when they're actually putting it on patients, and then probably publishing a study after that to either inform the rest of the field how to actually use the product.
And this goes back to talking to the community before we really dove into this deeply, and we did. We sat in operating rooms, we saw how physicians handled material? How did the patient feel afterwards? How did they feel before? And we kind of took all that information in, and we wanted to make sure this graft and our product would fit into that workflow of the plastic surgeon. So we made sure whatever our graft method was, it wasn't outside of what they currently do, right? So it's not taking away time from the operating room or increasing time in the operating room. We would like to standardize this sort of breast reconstruction area of the nipple and areola breast reconstruction. And so we think with this graft and with an engraftment method that everyone is very familiar with in the field of breast reconstruction, we can sort of streamline it a little bit more for these doctors and sort of get the engraftment method done quicker than it normally would otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the current reconstructive techniques for the nipple area are primarily dependent on surgeon skill. Mm-hmm. So if you can maybe eliminate some of that fact, I mean, some surgeons are going to be more skilled regardless, but in terms of the actual regeneration, reconstruction of the nipple areola, if we can make that process better and available for more patients, all the better.
And we save time in the operating room. Those surgeons' time is very valuable, right? So if they can focus even 5-10 minutes extra on something else, that's what we'd like to try and help out on the surgeon side as well, and not just the patient.
What else do you see? And I know you're early in the process, but what else is out there? Are we going to start replacing ears? Are we going to, penises, those kind of things? I mean, what are we going to, what else is out there?
No, absolutely. People are working on all of it. So, like I said about lung regeneration, there are one major company really working on regrowing lungs outside of the human body. I mean, this has been sort of their area, right? There are a lot of academic labs working on ears. They're working on lungs. They're working on hearts, livers, kidneys.
In fact, there are functioning hearts, at this point, and bladders, because they're much more of a mechanical nature. Absolutely. With muscle contractions. But then you've got livers and kidneys, which are more of filtration. And those are a little bit bigger bite in terms of the depth of the knowledge of the size of the project.
But it's being pushed forward, and it's very exciting. The field of regenerative medicine and tissue engineering, if you're coming in from an engineering standpoint, is growing fast, and there are a ton of people coming in, and it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be in this area. We just so happen to be in the area of breast reconstruction, and we're really pushing forward on it, and we're excited to get out our inaugural product and then phase 2 of it, work on some other products coming forward.
So you guys have had a lot of conversations with breast cancer survivors and talking to them about your product. I guess one of my concerns would be I don't want to be the first to go, or maybe I do. I mean, maybe depending on how big the mastectomy is and how much tissue is taken, maybe I would want to have women said I would volunteer to be the first.
Absolutely. I think that we've definitely had reach out from the community, from either a support system or from a patient currently or about to go under a mastectomy. They want to know if we can, basically take their nipple and areola complexes or give them a donor nipple areola complex, now or in the near future. There has been a lot of reach out on both ends, us going out to the community and the community reaching out to us. So there are people who are ready for this product. They're absolutely ready for it. It's just a matter of us making sure we do our due diligence on the scientific end to make sure it's safe for these people. And so that's where we're at right now with that.
And is it something that you could graft on at any time? So I've had my mastectomy a year, 2 years later, then I get the nipple graft?
Right. I would anticipate probably one of our first patients being someone who's had a failed nipple reconstruction, right? Because the current techniques, generally, if it's a 3D tattoo, it's going to fade over a period of time. If it's a surgical reconstructive technique, they tend to lie flat over a period of time. So I would imagine probably a first patient being someone who may have already had this and have suffered the consequences of a failed reconstruction.
And so, it could be a patient that had it 10 years ago or just newly undergoing a reconstruction. Ideally, we'd love for it to be later down the line. As those people are undergoing that initial reconstruction, the last phase of the initial reconstruction, let's be able to supply those grafts immediately. But if somebody needs a reconstruction later down the road, absolutely, our product would be available for them.
And we don't anticipate any of these surgeries being, too invasive.
Correct.
Because after conversation with plastic surgeons and seeing how we might actually engraft this on. It's called an on-lay engraftment technique. And what that means is you're removing just the couple top layers of skin. So you're not cutting all the way through the epidermis, and then it would be sutured on in that spot. It may be even something that could be an outpatient procedure.
Right.
Wow. And how long would it take to become one with your body?
In the laboratory setting right now, we actually see beautiful blood formation within about 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, absolutely gorgeous with red blood cells flowing throughout these vessels. So that's something we're doing this due diligence process on the scientific side, is what is our expectation and how quickly can we get that to reincorporate into the body.
This is just incredible. I mean, so in the last few of our shows, obviously we've been here talking to you guys, but we also did a show with the guys over at X Prize that the winner invented a tricorder that examines for 34 different conditions, and pretty much non-invasive. I mean, there might be a blood stick here and there, but it's incredible that you guys are on this leading edge of developing things that it seems so minor to replace a nipple, but it is psychologically a huge part of their recovery. I mean, it's obvious. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing. First of all, that's a fantastic thing. Wow. It's
I mean, regenerative medicine is amazing, and the beauty of it is you're using natural biology to make it happen versus trying to recreate something new. And the issue with recreating something new is there's too much going on biologically to recreate, at least at this point, because we don't understand it all from a scientific perspective. We understand a lot, but not nearly enough at this point.
It's exciting to be part of the field of regenerative medicine and tissue engineering now during this time where we do have such growth, and it's fun and it's cool to kind of talk to other people who are in the space and who are not in the space and just have all these ideas of like where they'd like to go, is like regrowing a lung and regrowing a kidney. To think about it, it's like somebody just they thought about it at one time and somebody said you guys were crazy, right? And then they went into the lab and it's been going. I mean, like that's a huge area, is lung and kidney regeneration outside the human body or even inside the human body. And it's a huge area and a huge amount of resources are being spent on it. People spend their careers on something like this, right? And so being a new field, this is what we're going to be doing, is that we are starting our career now and we plan to be here for a while to get out new products as well moving down the line.
Yeah, amazing. So you guys have patents and IP protected.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about that we?
Just thank you very much for having us on today and being able to kind of explain what we do at BioAesthetics.
Yeah, it's amazing. And thank you definitely for all the great work that you do. And I can't wait to hear about you guys being in market and hearing about some of the positive stories from some of these patients that are going to have their lives changed.
I do have one more question for you guys.
Of course.
I'm interested in this. The organ donor system is established, but how do you guys get on the We Want the Nipples list? I'm not trying to be funny about it, but I mean, legitimately, like, who even knows?
Well, so, I mean, right now, I guess from an organ recovery standpoint, the way the current tissue banks and procurement facilities, they're generally there. They know, unfortunately, patients are, passing. And so they generally are there talking to the families and talking to the patients and then consenting them to say, would you like to donate your body to science or organs or tissues and whatever that might be. And so the way we get into that system is, basically approach the tissue banks and talk to them and say, here's kind of what we're looking to do. Or, would you be able to do this? And then, the process from there is they're amending their consents and then what they're discussing with the patients or the patients' families at the time of passing.
That alone sounds like a big task. Like there's got to be a zillion things you have to cover, and it's a sales job in and of itself.
Right. I mean, luckily all the tissue banks we've been working with are very responsive and buy into what we're doing and think it's awesome. Luckily, we haven't I don't think anyone's going to object to what we're doing, but...
Yeah, we've been, very lucky entering into a field like this, something that's very sensitive, and hearing from both the supply and also from the breast cancer community, both for male and female.
I mean, everyone's supportive.
Yeah, they've been very supportive. We hope to be just as supportive back. So we're excited to kind of cultivate this relationship on both the organ donor side and also the breast cancer survivor side as well moving forward.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us today. We'd love to get back on and update you
Yeah,
down the road.
That would be so great. Definitely. Please.